Germany was a latecomer in the empire race, which was already well underway when the country was unified in 1871. Germany, like other European powers, wanted the honor and prestige of having a colonial empire. German foreign policy in that period was intensely nationalistic. It changed from realpolitik to the more aggressive Weltpolitik in an effort to expand the German Empire. They managed to gain foothold in Oceania, Asia and Africa, but they also wanted influence in America. But there was a big threat, the expanding United States of America. Germany knew that their only chance to gain land in the Americas is by going to war with US. Germany's first plan was to attack naval power on the US East Coast and thus gain a free hand to establish a German naval base in the Caribbean and to negotiate for another in the Pacific. Naval Lieutenant Eberhard von Manty, later admiral and a naval historian, was assigned the task of drawing up the plans. Manty, then 28 years old, began the work in late 1897. Working through the winter into 1898, the secret plans were referred to as Manty's Winter Correspondence. With support from the Kaiser, Tirpitz formed a plan to create a navy worthy of Germany's imperial ambitions, called the Tirpitz Plan. The Kaiser directed a series of naval expansions, collectively called the German Naval Laws, to bring his goal closer to fruition. The Imperial German Navy had already started building powerful new battleships, such as the Kaiser Friedrich, the third class, which was to be completed by 1902. The first German invasion plan of the US called for a great German fleet to sail across the Atlantic Ocean and to engage and defeat the US Navy's Atlantic Fleet in a decisive battle. German naval artillery attacks would then be directed on the established Norfolk Naval Shipyard, the expanding Newport News Shipbuilding Center, and all other naval strength in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. Von Manty called this area the most sensitive point of American defenses, the reduction of which would force the US to negotiate. Another attack was to be aimed at the prominent Portsmouth Naval Shipyard at the junction of the states of Maine and New Hampshire. The harbor defenses of New York, von Manty thought, were too strong, with forts holding powerful anti-ship guns, to be considered a prime target. Once America's most important naval shipyards were reduced, the German naval task forces were to remain in commanding blockade positions, while a German negotiating team met with American government officials to wring from them whatever demands were determined appropriate by the Kaiser. The Kaiser found funding to be difficult for the expensive ships he wished for, and plans were delayed or shelved for the long-range armored cruisers necessary for supporting the fleet in a major engagement. Meanwhile, the Spanish-American War broke out in 1898, with successful US action in both the Caribbean and the Pacific. By August, US ground and naval forces had gained control of Puerto Rico, and a soon-to-be independent Cuba came under American economic influence. German plans for a Caribbean base were obstructed. By March 1899, it was clear that the American occupation of the hoped-for Caribbean bases in Puerto Rico and Cuba was intended to be permanent. In response, the Kaiser ordered the invasion plans withdrawn by von Manty. Rather than the reduction of important shipyards, the new plan involved a two-pronged land invasion of New York City and Boston. Some 60 warships and a massive train of 40 to 60 cargo and troop ships carrying 68,000 tons of coal, 100,000 soldiers and a large amount of army artillery would cross the Atlantic in 25 days. Following a decisive naval battle to obtain naval superiority, German troops were to be landed at Cape Cod and armed with artillery. The ground units were to advance upon Boston and fire into the city. The all-important attack on New York required high speed for success. It would begin with a troop landing on the peninsula of Sandy Hook, New Jersey, while warships worked to reduce the harbor fortifications, especially Fort Hamilton and Fort Tompkins. Next, the warships would advance to shell Manhattan and other areas of New York, hopefully causing American civilians to panic. In December 1900, the Kaiser decided that Plan 2 would best be carried out from a base on Cuba rather than sailing from Germany. This surprising development was alarming to his own general staff, as such a base would first need to be taken by force. Admiral Otto von Diederik's reported to the Kaiser that the German Navy was now stronger than the US Navy, so it was up to the army to solve the problem of the land strategy. General Alfred von Schlieffen was doubtful of the whole venture. He reported to the Kaiser that 100,000 troops would probably be enough to take Boston, but that many more would be required to take New York, a city of 3 million. Von Diederich thought that von Schlieffen was being very clever with the Kaiser, offering a seemingly positive answer that was impossible to carry out, as there was not even enough German shipping to carry 100,000 troops and their equipment. By this time, German officers had published what William Thomas Stead called in 1901 various fantastic schemes for invading the United States, but contemporary observers saw them as unrealistic. In August 1901, von Tirpitz sent secret orders to Lieutenant Hubert von Reber-Paschwitz, later Vice Admiral, a naval attaché serving at the German embassy in Washington, D.C. Von Reber-Paschwitz left Washington to scout out the proposed landing location on Cape Cod, which he found to be unsuitable because it was not within sight of friendly naval artillery support. He recommended shifting the landing to the beach near the lighthouse at Manomet Point. This beach could be supported by German warships standing out from Cape Cod. It also included a nearby hill with a commanding view. The hill was to be taken as quickly as possible because it was seen as useful for Army-directed artillery support of the initial stages of the intended troop advance northward toward Boston, some 72 kilometers away. Von Reber-Paschwitz was already familiar with an up-to-date American defensive report authored by Captain Charles Train in mid-1901 as part of Train's duties for the U.S. Navy Board of Inspection and Survey. Train, later made Rear Admiral, had written that Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the northern tip of Cape Cod, was the most vulnerable enemy landing location near Boston, and Cape Ann, 64 kilometers to the north of Boston, was the second most vulnerable. Using Train's report as his foundation, von Reber-Paschwitz reported back to Tirpitz's opinion that 2 attacking forces should be landed at these 2 points for a pincer approach to Boston, converging from Manomet Point and Rockport. After seeing von Reber-Paschwitz's report, von Schlieffen wrote in December 1901 that the inexperience of von Reber-Paschwitz in army operations cast serious doubts on his judgment regarding landing troop locations and major attack strategy. The existence of Train's Seacoast Defense Report, said von Schlieffen, was a signal that the US was alarmed about possible enemy invasion in the Boston area. The Americans would likely be better prepared to fight off such an invasion in the near future. From 1902 to November 1903, Naval Staff Officer Wilhelm von Buchsel reworked the plans for Tirpitz, making small changes in tactics. These plans, called Operationsplan Dreh, took world politics into consideration, specifying military and political advantages to be obtained by placing a naval base in Culebra, Puerto Rico, a position that could be used to threaten the Panama Canal. During this time, von Manti wrote in his diary that the East Coast is the heart of the United States, and this is where she is most vulnerable. New York will panic at the prospect of bombardment. By hitting her here, we can force America to negotiate. Buchsel carefully noted that a condition for success in the German invasion of America was the absence of a major conflict in Europe. Another condition was a poor state of American preparedness. Both of these conditions were eroding at the time of Buchsel's authorship of the Third Plan. The US had been aroused, filled with a new martial spirit after its victory over Spain in 1898. America had immediately begun building battleships, and the balance of sea power was shifting away from the German advantage, reported by von Diederich. The strongest navy in the world was expanding further, and other countries were planning very heavy dreadnought-type battleships. This put extra pressure on the German Navy, which never reached a position of parity in the Anglo-German naval arms race, nor did it expand enough to satisfy the warship and troopship numbers specified by von Manti and then by Buchsel in the various US invasion plans. The Venezuela crisis of 1902 to 1903 showed the world that the US was willing to use its naval strength to force an American viewpoint in world politics. The crisis established President Theodore Roosevelt's Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, setting a precedent for US intervention in South American European affairs. In April 1904, the balance of power was seriously shifted in Europe with the signing of the Entente Cordiale by Britain and France. This improved diplomatic relationship between the two countries allowed French and British military forces to be shifted elsewhere, usually to the detriment of Wilhelm's second hope for a colonial Reich, an empire of German influence much like the British Empire and the French colonial empire. Tsar Nicholas II of Russia refused to form a military alliance with Germany, so the Kaiser determined that he should focus on strengthening Germany for a possible European conflict rather than an overseas invasion. The US invasion plans were shelved in 1906,